Look now at lecture number 17. This is the first installment of the Parenting and the Holocaust, based upon the study done at Yad Vashem and Ben Gurion University in Israel. The success of Nazism is measured often by the damage that was inflicted on the battlefield and the annihilation of the Jewish people and other groups that were threatened by the Nazis in their quest to create pure Aryan blood race. This study concentrates on a much deeper impact of the Nazis' acts, as was said in the introductory lecture, one that they did not necessarily anticipate. The literature suggests that the desire to rebuild the family as quickly as possible was a commonality among Holocaust survivors. Many of them entered into loveless marriages of despair. They remained married even though they lacked the emotional resources necessary for the development of an intimate relationship with a spouse. It made it difficult for the survivor parents to provide proper nurturing for their own children. Many parents who survived the war were found to be emotionally unavailable to their children's emotional needs as they grew up. Due to perhaps a connection between the problems of nurturing and the inability to mourn the dead, preoccupied with the issues of life and death. These feelings remained unchanged for many years, hindering the development of a positive self-image in their offspring. One of the hallmarks of nurturing is a positive self-image. Studies have looked at the communication styles within the families of survivors and have found two major patterns emerge. Some survivor parents either excessively expose their children to their horror stories or alternatively were cannily silent about their experiences while using guilt-inducing, nonverbal, and indirect styles of communication with their children. These types of communication often scarred the children. Many parents transmitted their distrust of the external environment to their children, instilling in them a fear of people outside of the family itself. Survivor parents have also shown a tendency to become very much over-involved in their children's lives. Survivor parents are often overly sensitive and anxious about the behavior of their children. They overprotect them to the point of suffocation. This makes it difficult for children to become autonomous and to separate from their parents and gain their independence. We see much of that psychodynamic literature concerning the parents' ability of survivors as being rather bleak. Most of the literature that looks at parenthood after the Holocaust tends to paint a rather unhappy picture of the survivor's ability to provide their own children with a normal family life. One may say that this is perfectly understandable, but it's still something that must be faced and dealt with. So what the researchers here attempt to present is a comprehensive approach that tries to integrate historical facts, psychological impact on the people involved, and the social context in which these facts were reconstructed and deconstructed over and over again. In order to understand parenthood after the war, we must really take a look at our analysis the Israeli or other political and social contexts in which survivors settled and the dynamics of the Israeli society that have occurred over the years and generations. The people that were interviewed and studied for this study were all in Israel, so a lot of it is relevant to the Israeli society. It was a comprehensive approach, but this paper was only a starting point and should not be viewed as a conclusive last word in any way on the topic. They looked at about 60 biographical interviews in their research. Ben Gurion University since 1990 and Yad Vashem's archives during the fall semester of 1999 to the year 2000. And they identified certain themes which will be presented in the further lectures. The difference will become clear when we discuss the interviews with the members of the second generation, in which the family relations related to the Holocaust background was one of the main focus points of the interviews. One person interviewed was a girl by the name of Anat. And just to take some excerpts from Anat's interview, her story, at the age of 3, when her mother hid her in a cellar in the Warsaw Ghetto, her mother, who was working in the underground, smuggling Jewish children out of the ghetto, many times had to leave her alone. They came from a well-to-do family background, partly secular and partly professional, and partly Orthodox. So how did her mother's behavior affect Anat and her own choice when she married and became a mother in her own right? Analysis of the historical documentation and the oral testimonies have suggested that during the Holocaust, many of the victims could not take care of their children's physical needs. Moreover, they usually had to sacrifice the latter's emotional needs first in order to secure their physical survival. Up to the end of World War II, there was no accepted family educational psychological theory concerning what was an essential component in terms of emotional needs and survival, and how emotional needs for survival should be met. The emotional void and disruption that was created by the sequence of extreme violence and horror and humiliation created an art, some researchers call it, of physical survival that could be managed under the utmost conditions. Survivors often ask themselves, why did I survive and not my sister or my parents? What does this say about me if I stayed alive and they did not? This extreme distress, accompanied by the judgmental approach and silencing by society at large, helped maintain and intensify the emotional blocking that had taken root during the Holocaust. In light of this massive impairment, we take a look at the behavior of these people. Due to the complexity involved in resolving the past trauma, physical and emotional needs were often found to be in conflict with one another. This is especially true in the case of the generation that was born shortly after the end of the war. As noted earlier, during this time, when the extent and finality of the loss became clear, many survivors married in the displaced persons camps out of despair. While on the other hand, there was an urgent need to recreate a home and a family life. On the other, this was often at the expense of emotional caring and working through of the trauma that they had experienced. However, Anat's story tells us quite a bit as we listen to her testimony. Now, her testimony is quite long, and so I'm not going to share it with you, but a lot of the findings that I'll be talking about afterwards are reflected based upon the interview with her and what was found. And that story can be found in its detail with the doll that she tells about in this story, the doll that she used to keep herself company in the ghetto. It's all on exhibit in that children's exhibit at Yad Vashem, where a video presentation of Anat runs in tandem with the displaying of the doll, which kept her company in times when she was left alone and felt she was being abandoned. We'll talk about the issue of abandonment or perceived abandonment by children in many, many different circumstances. Thank you. This is lecture